Some of the past courses, this is the third year that I've worked with Max and the Living Mondo crew, and we focused a lot in the first couple of years on commercial aquaponics, and have kind of transitioned into this closed loop design with some focus on business. So this may not be for everybody, and you also may already have business experience, but I want to kind of come again from the patterns to the details. We'll talk from a little bit of a higher level about what the process might be of developing your business if you want to do aquaponics as a business. So I think the two main distinctions to look at is business plans and business models. They're a little bit different, but I think they're both important to understand. And the first thing that I want to say about them is that the map is not the territory, right? So a business plan, the intention of a business plan is not to have it all figured out. It's more akin to, I would say, charting a course when you are, say, going to sail across the bay. You don't necessarily know how each gust of wind is going to blow the boat and how you're going to need to readjust course, but it gives you kind of an idea for what you want to do when you actually do take it out on the bay. And then hopefully you also have some contingency plans in case things get a little crazy. Okay, so you definitely have your numbers figured out so that you know how much time you have in cash flow, and we'll get into some of those things. So the business plan is probably what people are most familiar with and have the most fun with when we're designing these things. Not really, but things like the executive summary, your financial statements, market evaluation, things of that sort. So, and I think the real important ones are your profit and loss. Is this business actually going to make money? And the cash flow. Because the cash flow is really about the timing of your business. We've heard cash is king, and some of the folks in the Green MBA say no margin, no mission, right? So you can have a great mission, but if you are in the red, you don't have very long, okay? So figuring out the cash from the beginning, I see this as a cash flow statement, really as also as a profit and loss statement, because you're taking the red is your costs, right, and the black is your revenues. So what are the costs to run your system? So that's the business plan, and again, this is really high level, it's really quick. The intention is not to get into the details of how to actually do this, but to give you an idea of the process and some of the things that you want to think about. So what is a business model? How does that differ from a business plan? Well, the business model, great definition that I found about that, is a business model describes how your company creates, delivers, and captures value. Okay? So it's not just about how the numbers work in your system, but it's about the relationships. And when you're designing those relationships, again, I always lean back on this one. The potentials are limited only by the mind of the designer. So in looking at business models, I've found this very helpful template. I'm a big fan of templates. It gives you a framework. You can lay it over anything that you're looking at and say, what are the things that I need to take into account while I'm developing this business model? So this is a great book called Business Model Generation. It focuses a little bit on the tech side. It was business models like Apple and Yahoo. But for me, it was really helpful in showing what the different potential templates are when you're developing your system. So when I went to, let's stress that for a minute. So your system, if that's how the cash and the materials are moving through your system to create value, for me the business model is really what are the relationships that you rely on to deliver value to your customers. So the customers are here, right? And then something from the non-product, it might be a downstream business that's really interested in what you're producing. Great example is Drossimo's system. His feedstock for that system is a waste stream from another business, right? So he made a relationship and he lowered his cost by closing a loop. He didn't close the loop within his own system, but he closed the loop within the region, right? Because instead of it being a waste stream, now it's getting fed back into something else. So when I went out to Growing Power, I was really interested in Will Allen's model. These are pictures that I took at Growing Power. I did a weekend workshop out there and really went out there interested in aquaponics and fell in love with worms. because they really are, Max called it the heart of his system. They're the heart of Will Allen's system. Will Allen takes 70,000 pounds of food waste per week, and feeds it to the worms. And where there was once a waste stream and other businesses had tipping fees to send it to the landfill, Will Allen now grows food. Fish and greens. And not only that, but he closes his backside loops too. Those are dedicated worm bins that are just for taking the trays after he cuts the microgreens. He takes all the root balls and all the root mass and just puts it right back into the worm bin. And they take care of that material in a month. And he closes the loop and brings it back in to his microgreens operation. He adds a little bit of worm castings for the loss, for the nutrient loss from the harvest, and a little bit of extra coconut husk to cut down on the mold for the sprouting. So when I got back, my head was spinning, and I had to do this. This is Will Allen's system, as I saw it, and the green is stuff that he had, operations that he has inside his own business model. The orange is regional, and the red is extra regional, so they're imports. I see them as vulnerabilities to the system. So the more that you can bring things closer, if not within your own system, at least within the region, right? But if we're relying on, say, a coffee ground producer, or somebody who makes, that there's, from the end of the coffee process, there might be a material that's useful to us. Well, that's great, use it, but be aware that the difference is in commodity prices, or when anything's from outside your region, you're going to be beholden to any of those dynamics that change as time goes on. So these are some of the revenue streams that Growing Power has. He actually does grow Jade Perch for Great Lakes restoration projects, because you can't commercially fish Jade Perch anymore because of the mercury content. And it's a culturally desired fish because all the fish fries up there. So whatever he produces, he does 10,000 fish in a batch. When he batches that system and harvests that, he sells them all out without pretty much even calling chefs. They call him and they ask him for it. So again, I found the business model canvas after I went out there. It's a pretty recent book, and I really recommend it if you're into this. And so I took the business model canvas and applied it to aquaponics. And this isn't a specific business in aquaponics. These are many of the potential value propositions that you can have with an aquaponics business. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these sections really quickly for us. So key partners, things like genetics, where are you going to get your fingerlings from? Is there any, bureaucratic hoops to jump through? Do you have grant partners that can help you to fund the startup? And things like relying on research. I mean, Max's network of all the professors and leaders in aquaponics that he knows are invaluable to him, so they're some of his key partners, right? The key activities, you're going to be producing food. Maybe you'll be doing some value-added stuff. Maybe you're doing education. What is it that you're doing in order to derive the value? And then how are you going to sell it? Why do people want to buy it, right? Think about it's organic, it's local, we can call it sustainable, family farm. It depends on, there's a host of these things, but it's what are you trying to communicate to the people that are going to buy your product? And then the key resources. I see people are a key resource, and the knowledge base that you develop within your organization is a key resource. Experience, wisdom, and then the inputs and infrastructure. Making these relationships depending on what you're relying on to run your particular operation. And then how are you going to sell it? So the channels. Are you going to have a farm stand, or are you going to have a table at the farmer's market? Are you going direct to restaurants? Do you need to go through a distributor? Figuring out how you're going to take your product from when it comes out of the end of your system and deliver it to the people that are going to buy it. And then you have the what are the different products, and you're probably doing species selection based on on these products and the value propositions that you want to offer your customer. And then cost, what does it cost to deliver that product to your customer? So a lot of this is included in a typical business plan, but for me, it's more of it's a little bit more graphical for me. There's a way that I like to think with the whole picture in mind, and I find that business plans tend to break things down. They're sort of reductionist, where the business model canvas is a little bit more holistic. So how does your system relate to the other systems that it relies upon in order to be a thriving business? It's not just a system in isolation. And so one of the things that we did with this Fort Bragg project, this is the cover of the feasibility study, and we also authored a pilot project that is having a hopefully very exciting call tomorrow about getting the pilot project on the ground. And this, again, it was a grant that was written. It was an economic development grant. It wasn't an environmental grant. They wanted to see where there were opportunities to take waste streams and turn them into additional value where once there were costs. So it was an organic waste feasibility study. We looked at many of the organic waste that are produced in a relatively isolated, not completely, but Fort Bragg, there's 3 roads in and out basically. So when they ship something over the hill or they ship it back, they really feel it. It's like, I think I was quoted $600 a truckload just to get something out of town. Now the waste stream isn't quite that much, but they're definitely paying a significant amount of money. Well, a restaurant produces 50% of a restaurant's waste stream is organic waste. So it's higher than the average. I think across all the economy, including residential, it's something around 9 to 12%. But a restaurant is 50%. So think about that. If you have 2 dumpsters out back, and you get rid of 50% of your waste stream, you just cut your waste costs in half, right? On top of that, the brewery, so we were talking about a lot of restaurant scraps, and this is where I can mention a little bit about invisible structures also. So one of the most challenging restrictions on this system for me and for us while we were working on it was not a physical limitation. It was a limitation that was imposed by the state that said that on site, when you're dealing with food scraps, you may only have 50 yards at any one time. That's not, again, it's not physics. That's a law that you have to deal with. So it was a design parameter for me to figure that out, how to do that. And I had just this, it's funny where inspiration and changes in systems of design come from. I was talking to the president of the brewery, the North Coast Brewing Company is out that way. Awesome beer. And so it's a good friend to have. And, but, we were just having a conversation about the restaurant scraps. And he said, oh, and by the way, when you're ready, I have between 8 and 16 dump trucks per week of spent grain. And I thought, spent grain is not food scraps. Spent grain is an agricultural byproduct. So I looked up the regulations for agricultural byproduct, and there's no limitation on that. So all of a sudden, the system, the cap on the system just went through the roof. We still want to look at how we can get more of these food scraps into the system, and there's workarounds for that. But the point really is just that invisible structures are often the greatest limitation on your system. So just keep that in mind as you're doing your design. So for me, it's really about putting things in context. It's not just about what I'm doing on my side, but how does that relate to others? And remember the Dan Barber talk about the wetland farm is that same thing. So I'm trying to also take ecological principles and apply them to what I'm doing in business, and hopefully give a little bit of business help to some of these great projects that are happening. Because one of the things that I saw before I took the Green MBA was that there was a lot of great ideas, but there wasn't a lot of help on landing these. So that's my niche that I'm trying to fill in the system as we're all trying to make this change. So I'm going to give you my card. Here it is. And actually, if you're a kind of techie geek and you want to, if you text my name, Vern Green, to 50500, you'll get all that information by using text. So that's it. I think we probably have a couple of minutes or two for questions. Oh, good.
Do you know of a aquaponics business that maybe has their business plan that we could maybe look at for examples?
I haven't found any. Transparency in business is a very interesting thing to ask of people, and I'm about to launch one myself where I even having those values, it's still a stretch for me, but I'm going to do it just to show that it can be done. But my answer is no. If anybody else has seen them, please let me know because I'd love to see it. There are things like enterprise budgets that are pretty much templates that like the USDA offers for companies or farms typically that are trying to develop a business model. So there are aquaculture business templates that can be found, but as far as a specific company that's sharing its business plan or business model, I haven't seen it.
I have a question related to Will Allen's model. Over on the left, you have some of the red squares.
Yeah.
And you're saying that those are the things that you thought were like negatives. And I was just curious if those were.
Yeah, they're actually, the red represented what I call extra-regional. They're from outside of his economic region.
But specifically, I was wondering.
They were things like the coconut industry. Feedstocks that he relies upon that come from outside of the Milwaukee area. Yes?
I'm curious about the like nutritional value or food value, the energy value of spent grains. Is it basically for worm casting, or is it food for fish, or what would you use it for?
Well, he was, the brewery was originally looking at turning his spent grain into biochar. And this is a great example of having a solution first and then trying to make it fit. And he was thinking, how do I dewater it? How do I dehydrate it? How do I, build a kiln? And one of the issues with the shipping is that you're shipping a lot of water weight. And so, well, what's the water content of the spent grain? And he said, somewhere between 70 and 90%. Guess what the ideal range of moisture is for worm composting? 70 to 90%. So he doesn't have to dewater it and all that. So, as far as what the energy return is, I wouldn't grow grain to feed it to worms per se. But once it's a waste stream, let's just reincorporate it. Yes.
So Will Allen's taking organic scraps from restaurants and putting them, are they all organic? Does that matter if it is not an organic food to put in your worm bin?
Will Allen is a very practical actor. He's trying to grow food for people in his community. So I don't think he's necessarily concerned with whether or not they're organic materials. Much of it, I think 70% of it is actually brewery waste. It is Milwaukee. And many of the food scraps come from larger institutions like cafeterias, hospitals, and different corporate campuses and things like that. So the complexity of getting a bunch of restaurant waste isn't so much. It's big producers, and the answer is no, I don't think he's worried. As a matter of fact, some of the produce comes in boxes, and they put it on the worms, boxes and all, which is, it's actually okay for the worms. One of the other good things about a worm composting operation is that they will eat wax cardboard, which is something that recycling operations have an issue with because right now it's a waste stream. So maybe one or two more if there are, and
if you text that, the phone number is different. Is that phone number still going to be okay? It's not this 861 phone number. It's the 799 number, I think it was.
yeah, that'll be
That'll work.
Yeah.
That's just a link, though, right?
Huh?
That's a link. You text back a link.
It texts back the information. So. No?
Just his contact info.
What are you doing with your worms?
Well, I was kind of joking with this brewery owner that he's about to back himself into the worm compost business because he had this waste stream and it was a cost, and now it's, now it's a potential to be a revenue stream. Worm castings are very valuable. They're sold to up to $400 a yard. I think that's a bit much, but they're definitely valuable. And compared to the $30 a yard tops that you can get for premium compost, I think it's a really good conversion of what was once a waste stream.
I actually heard where you can, if you grind up the worms and then put them in a centrifuge, you can get some essential amino or some amino acids out of it. And there was a brewery that was using that to clean their vats. So I don't. Something to look into. I have no idea about
in
it.
some of the literature that I read, we don't go too much down the wormhole, but but in some of the literature I read that these worms have all the essential fatty acids that are required of people. So worm burgers.
Yeah.
Big slide, that sounds good.
All right. Thanks very much, and I'm around.